evening, everybody. Welcome. I really hope you find it helpful. I've always felt that anybody with enough background information, I absolutely believe that each and every one of you will be able to learn Gemara. Certainly Gemara on a level that your children are learning if you have children, with the benefit of an English translation Gemara, which are these Art Scroll, there's others. I was an 8th grade Rebbe for 15 years. Some of those years, whenever there was a track class, I volunteered for the weakest track in the school, just to make you all comfortable. And I absolutely loved every minute of it. Many of the boys who came to me had been, learning Gemara for 3 years and were extraordinarily frustrated. And so you're better off now because you're starting hopefully from a great experience. So I don't get frightened easily. And I over the years, I've put together a background information that you need in order to transition you to getting Gemara and understanding it well. So I hope approaching with confidence. I'm delighted to help you on your journey. And I really hope that you find it helpful. This is the introduction to Gemara. We're working off a Gemara book that we published recently. You do not need the book. Everything that you have will be here. Now, here's a handout that I published, and I'd like to walk you through this because by way of introduction, I think it's important that to understand what this is all about and what we're going to try to accomplish here. Now, this is, my objective and a good lesson. You set out your objective, the learners, that's you, with confident in their ability to understand the Mishnah. We'll get to soon what Mishnah is. Mishnah is just short halachos, and then Gemara is a discussion of the halachos. We'll get to that soon. Well enough to assist their children with their Mishnah and Gemara homework with the aid of an Art Scroll Mishnah Gemara or similar text. That's my goal. My goal is that you should be able to do this on your own with the aid of those tools. But I do think it's important to really go through and talk about what are the barriers. Why is it that some people find Gemara frustrating? Why is it that people who have never learned Gemara say like, hey, forget it, this is not for me. And so there are real barriers, and I think it's important in any endeavor, whenever you do anything, it's important to think about what the barriers are and how you're going to overcome them. So I identified these 8. There may be others, but this is what it looks like to me. And I'm going to work my way through these just at the beginning, again, to give you an understanding about how I see things, what the very legitimate barriers are for succeeding Gemara. And we're starting from here, number 1. Okay, so you have a language barrier. Gemara is in Aramaic and Hebrew. So most of us, I assume most people or all people on the call, English is your first language. So you have a mix of Aramaic and Hebrew. We got 2 different languages. They are similar somewhat, but that's certainly a barrier. Lack of punctuation mark in the kudos. The Gemara does not have any punctuation at all. And that's a big deal, of course. In road talk, driving, you would say there are no yield signs, no stop signs, no red lights. And, in English, we have our punctuation, a comma, a semicolon, a colon, a period. That lets you know the Gemara doesn't have any of that. I'll show it to you soon. Historical context, like who are these people? Who are the people of Gemara and how did Gemara develop? Number 4, this is a very big one. Everyone in Gemara speaks an insider talk. Okay, that means that people who are, the folks who are learning Gemara, people like us who learn it and the Talmidei Chachamim who established Gemara were talking among themselves. They had a common language with a background of information that regular folks don't have. So, that would be the equivalent of watching a football game, not having known football, and people use football terms, or if we'll do it I'm sitting with a bunch of chefs, a bunch of cooks, people are talking recipes and they're talking about, whatever. and I don't know what that language is. So most of us, again, if you're on the call here, that if you're on the Zoom conference, that means you're here because you don't have that background information. Every single one of these, I don't want to frighten you. I just want to encourage you. If you check these off, some of them are easy to deal with. If you solve these barriers, I believe that you'll really be able to do it. Okay, for children, it's a barrier that the references are discussed in Gemara are from that time period. I mean, imagine if I'm 61 years old, okay, so I'd be entitled to say this, but if I would say to you, for example, you take the 8-track player, or a cassette recorder, you'd start rolling your eyes. You say this person doesn't get it. The analogies that we use to make things more comfortable are from a different time period. The logical thread, the flow, question, answer, comment, we created tools to help you do that. Gemara is all textual. If you're learning it by yourself, and auditory when taught in class, 70% of people learn best visually. So that's certainly a challenge if you're a visual learner, and most people are. That doesn't mean you cannot learn another way. It just means that the other way doesn't come naturally to you. So that's a barrier. And some children, usually it's the independent thinkers, the ones that are creative and think out of the box, that just come out and say it. Hey, what do I got to learn this for? What's the point? Why do I need to do this? Why don't the Gemara is really discussing how halacha evolved and what the Jewish law is in a certain case. So why do we need to do this? Why don't we just go, why don't they just bottom line it, as they say? Okay, some question that I've gotten from so many boys. And here's my action plan, where we're going to, some of these we're going to solve in this presentation, and some we're going to do later in this series. But like I said, this is doable. Let's get to it, okay? So here's the introduction to Gemara here is, it's a total of 10 lessons in our book. And again, I created this because I felt that there's background information that's needed. So let's just talk about how Mishnah and Gemara evolved. Now, the nature of the Chumash, the nature of Hashem, of the Torah, is that we have Chumash. There are 5 Svarim, 5 books, right? Bereshis, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. And then there's Navi, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Nevi'im are the prophets, Ksuvim are the other writings, like, for example, Megillas Eicha that we just read, that we read on Tisha B'Av, Megillas Esther. So those 24 Svarim are part of the Torah Shebiksav. Now, okay, so I'm just going to circle some of the things when we get them, when we have them here in the handout, in our book here. So this is Torah Shebiksav, that's called the Torah that was written, and that refers to those 24 Svarim. And then there's a Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, and that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, what happened was the Bnei Yisrael came to, after the Jewish people left Egypt, after they left Mitzrayim, they went to Har Sinai, to Sinai mountain, and there Hashem gave them the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, went up to the mountain, and he stayed in Hashem's and God's presence for 40 days and 40 nights. During that time, Hashem taught him the oral Torah. Now, what does that mean? So think of an example. Let's say a job interview. Okay, if you go for a job interview and you have a job supervising a secretarial pool. Okay, there are 5 secretaries, and you got a job there as a supervisor. So you meet with the boss, you get a job description, but when you meet with the boss and you have your interviews and you start whoever's hiring you, they don't go into the nitty gritty. Obviously, or the interview would take 5 hours. So they do big picture. We want our workers to feel supported. We want everybody. We want it to feel like a family office, or we want it to feel structured, not like a family. I don't want people schmoozing, walking in or out. So they'll tell you about the general culture. They won't give you all the details, and that's how. So the Torah writes. For example, think of Shabbos. The Sabbath, the 7th day of rest. or tefillin, what we wear, men wear on their phylacteries, that they're parshios. We wear boxes with some scroll from the Torah, different parshios. So Shabbos is probably an easier example. I'll stick with that one. So it says in Shabbos, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos, remember the day of Shabbos. It doesn't say any details. We know there are a lot of details. We're not supposed to cook. We're not supposed to travel. We're not supposed to use electricity. So a lot of these halachas, these laws, aren't listed in the Torah. If you pick up a chumash, again, if you go to this Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, all you're going to see is keep the day of Shabbos, respect the day of Shabbos, remember the day of Shabbos, not much in the way of details. How did those details come? Those details were taught to Moshe Rabbeinu when he was up at Har Sinai. And we call that Torah Shebe'al Peh. That is called the oral Torah. Now, I'm going to go, this particular book, we did it with review questions. I'm not going to go through them, but just know that they're there if you want to take advantage of it. And I'll try to stop for a moment so that this is going to be recorded so you can see it and review them. You don't need to get the book to benefit from this. So what happened was Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe came down from Har Sinai, when he came down from Mount Sinai, so his student, his Talmud Yehoshua, he taught everything to him. And it went from Rebbe to Talmud, from teacher to student throughout the generations. And it was intended to be like that. In other words, the written Torah was only supposed to be written, and then there was supposed to be the Torah Shebe'al Peh, which is the oral Torah, which is with the details, the fine print. Okay, so here, just a note here. Okay, the halachas of the Torah are divided into what Hashem told Moshe, taught to Moshe, hinted to in the pasuk. I don't really think that we need at this point to go through all these details, but that's, again, if you want to look at it more carefully, feel free to. This is again, these are review sheets on lesson number 1. Again, I'll just pause for a moment. You can take a screenshot later if you'd like to when you're reviewing it. So what happened, again, this is lesson 2. We're going into the history now of how Gemara was formulated. And what happened was after Moshe Rabbeinu, again, the first generation was Moshe Yehoshua ben Nun, Yeshua ben Nun, Yeshua, the son of Nun, was the next one in the cycle, so to speak, in this chain of Messiah. Pinchas, the son of Elazar, who was the grandson of Aharon HaKohen, the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, was the next one, and on it went from Rebbe to Talmud, and that's how it stayed throughout the generations. Now, later on, throughout the Jews went through rough periods, and in terms of culture, in terms of what was going on, which government was in charge at the time, and once the Romans got in, the Roman persecution made it difficult to study. It made it more difficult to learn Torah, and the fear was at the time, the Chachamim at the time felt that there might be Torah lost. This chain that went from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yeshua, and next Rebbe to Talmud, there was a real fear that would get eroded. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, you don't need to know this name, he was referred to as Rebbe because of the great love they had for him. But he was the leader of the Jewish people at the time. And he said that even though we have a rule that this is called Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral Torah, Peh means mouth. Ba'al Peh is conveyed by mouth. Ksav, I should have said that, sorry. Ksiva is to write. In Rosh Hashanah you say, Ksiva v'chasim etava, you should be written, inscribed for a good year. So writing is Ksiva, so Torah Shebiksav, the Torah that is written, and Torah Shebe'al Peh is oral. Many people, this is just another thing that insider talk, people find a little confusing. We call it Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral Torah, and yet we're writing it, it's written. So this, again, that's the purpose of this, to try to take the mystique out of it and try to help you be able to understand just the backstory. Now, this is important here. This knowledge base, what happened was once they decided to write the Torah down. So think of it as people got together, some physically, some people weren't all there at one point in time at the same time, but people started to transmit and to commit to paper the learning that they had. Now, think of the way, I guess the best way would be think of the files in your computer. That would be a relevant example, not an 8-track example. Okay, you have files in your computer. So you have, personal work and charity work. Let's say you have 3 main categories, and under personal, you have finances and family stuff, whatever. Okay, so you have each folders and subfolders and the like. So when the Chachamim, when the sages sat down to get the Torah written down, and they had, just think of it, they had these slips of paper with knowledge, with all sorts of halachas of Jewish law. They divided them into categories and subcategories, and these are the 6. We call them, so the Mishnah was that first body of knowledge that was the very first body of knowledge that was taught, was called the Mishnah, and it's divided into 6 Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. There are 6 orders, so to speak. There are 6 very large categories, and they are here: Zrayim, the laws of planting and growing food; Mayet, the all Shabbos, Yantif; Nashim are the halachas of marriage and divorce; Nezikin are damages; Kachim are things that are related to the Beis HaMikdash and Korbanos; and Taharas is Tum and Tahara, the laws of ritual purity. And then each Gemara, these were Siddharim, these were large categories, and then each category had subsections. Probably the easiest one to think about would be Moed here. Moed means the laws of Yantif, so that's something most of we're more familiar with. So if you opened up a Mishnayos that had all of Moed in there, it would be divided into Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Each one of those has its own Masechta. Masechta is like a book. So a Seder is like an order, a series, I guess you would say, a series. Gemara, a particular Gemara is called a Masechta, that's a book, and which is divided into prakim, chapters, and page numbers. Okay, so that's how it goes. So we give an example here of Zrayim. Let's stick with the Shabbos and Yantif. It might be easier, and we're actually going to do something for Mayit. If you wanted to know the halachas of Yom Kippur, let's say you wanted to know the laws pertaining to Yom Kippur, you would, from the 6, you would go to your Jewish books with the Svarim are, and you would look for a Moed, that grouping, okay, that category, and you open it up and look for, it's called Yuma, the day of the holiest day of the year. And there you would find different chapters, about different parts of the service of Yom Kippur. Okay, I'm sorry, these are just random pieces of information. We're going to actually get to a piece of Gemara soon, and I'd like you to, as soon as we finish a couple of more lessons, I want to get started on showing you, taking care of one of these barriers that we had at the beginning. We're doing now the historical context. Let's finish this. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had Talmidim. There were students, Rav and Shmuel. You don't need to know this the details right now. So they learned, for a while people learned Mishnah, and it didn't include the reasons. Okay, so the reasons, I'm sorry. Again, the reasons were not listed for the halachas, and that stayed for Torah Shabbal Peh, and eventually they wrote that down also, and that became Gemara. Okay, again, I'm just going to stop for a second at the review questions, and then we'll go on to this last one before we actually get into a piece of Gemara. So this is the general format of what a page of Gemara looks like, and I'm actually going to take a small page and learn a few lines with you. very soon. So the way this is set up, if you look at the middle of the page, is actually this in the middle here is the actual Gemara text, and it's it does not need to be in this format. It wasn't always like this, but thankfully, there was a Shas, meaning a book, Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. All of the Gemaras were printed in Vilna. It was a very city in Lithuania that had a lot of Talmidei Chachamim, a lot of scholars, and they decided to use this format. It was easier because people were committing things to memory. It was easier to be more organized like this. So basically all the pages look like this. But what it looks like is here in the middle you have Gemara. On the inside of the page is the Pirush, the commentary of Rashi. Rashi was named Rabbi Shimon Yitzchaki. He lived in France. He was a wine merchant, a tremendous Talmid Chacham, a great scholar. And he most of what he does is just explain the pshat, the meaning. He keeps it simple. Typically, he'll just explain what things are and give us a little hand through it, long before Art Scroll. And on this side, we have Tosfos. Tosfos, Mosef means to add. Musaf is an added prayer for davening for Shabbos. So Tosfos is the addition to Rashi, excuse me, and the addition to it's usually questions on Rashi. Many of the people, it's plural, they were Balei Tosfos, the people who wrote the Tosfos. Many of them lived in France. Actually, many of them were Rashi's grandchildren who wound up arguing with him in learning, not personally, of course, but that's just the way it was set up. Excuse me. So the way we refer to it is two sides of a page are called a blat. One side is called an amud or a daf. So a daf is a blat, and an amud is one side. So if you look at the page number here, the way it looks, just read that top line. So over here, it says, this is actually what we're going to be doing our classes on when we get to Gemara. So this top over here is Elu Metzias, from right to left. This is the name of the Perik. This is Perik Sheni. It's the second chapter, and it's in Baba Metzia is the name of the Gemara. Okay, so it's Elu Metzias again, you have plenty of time to get your hands on this. You don't need to really master all of this now. I'm just giving you some general information. Elu Metzias is the name of the Perik, of the chapter. It's the second Perik in Baba Metzia, which is one of the chapters. This is actually in the Zikin. It's in the halachas about damages. Okay, and then this is just the other side of a page, and the pagination, the way we count, unfortunately, it's another thing that's different than the way we do it. If you look at that Chav Beis here, that means that's 22. Again, unfortunately, another part of this is all what you need to know to get around to start Gemara. So Chav Beis it's like page 22, side 1. So it would look like this is side 1. If you look at the Chav Beis with one dot, Chav Beis Amar Aleph. So it's page 22, side 1, and the flip side of that is either more confusion. I'm sorry. Either it would be the page before that. Excuse me. Would either be Chav Aleph Amud Beis, right? The page previous to this would be page 21, side 2, or sometimes we actually use numbers. I'm sorry. It just is. That's the way things are. Okay. So I'd like to really get to start to what I think is our main objective today, is to think about how to learn Gemara, and mostly what I really would like to place the great emphasis on is look at this number 4 in our 8. Remember, if you remember, this was at the beginning, the 8 challenges. So if it makes you feel good, if you like checking things off lists. So 1 and 2, the language barrier of Aramaic and Hebrew and punctuation in Nakudos. My very, very, very strong recommendation is that you only begin with a translated Mishnah and Gemara that has punctuation. Just take these 2 off the table. Thankfully, when I was a kid, we didn't have these tools. Thankfully, they're there. You can pick up a Mishnah or a Gemara anywhere that has great translation. And the kudos, in my opinion, you don't need any more barriers than you have to deal with. So that's, get those 2 out of the way. And eventually, if you decide to stay with it and you want to learn some more Gemara, you're welcome to try to do it on your own. But for now, I strongly suggest you take it out of the way. Historical context we talked about, right? Who the people of the Gemara are. How did the Gemara come to be? Gemara was the oral Torah that Hashem, the instruction that Hashem gave to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moshe, and it went on subsequently throughout the generations. And that was called Torah Sheba'al Peh. Eventually, it was written down because people, the Chachamim, were afraid that it would be forgotten. First, the Mishnah was written down. You don't need to know the name in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And later on, the Gemara was written down as well. So this is what I really would like to spend the rest of our presentation on, because this is like really important. And to be able to take the mystique out of it and be able to show you how to use a translation, this is what I want to talk about. So there's insider talk. Leave this back to football. I'm not going to go into it due to time. It was just an analogy that I used, not important. So what is very important is, again, let's say I would walk into a room where people are talking about recipes, or people are talking molecular biology, I happen to know pretty well. What are physics, advanced physics that I know nothing about, or I'm going in where people are talking about recipes and I'd like to find out a little more about it. Now, I don't know anything about this, or somebody else is watching, someone who's not familiar with sports is watching a game. So you need somebody with you when they say things like, separate the eggs, what does that mean? Or they say other terms that people, obviously more advanced terms that people would be talking about. Someone needs to whisper in my ear what that means. So you need a whisperer. I call it a whisperer. And I think they do a masterful job of, you have great whisperers there. And I'm going to actually now go into a piece of Gemara and show you what it looks like. And again, this is the main takeaway for today. So I think when I'm finished with this, I do have some more things that I'd like to cover, but in terms of relevancy and some other things. But as soon as I get through this, I'll be glad to open to questions. This is my main objective, as I said, to help you understand what Gemara is. And this is what you'll need. And when you get this straight, you really could approach virtually any Gemara and get at least the basics, certainly Mishnah. Now, this is an actual page of Gemara, like we just showed you in that book, okay? So this is, again, just drawing on the lessons we had before. This is the page number, side 32, page 32, side 2. Amar Lahem Hamamuna is the name of the parak, the name of the chapter. Unfortunately, the name of the chapter doesn't always explain what it's talking about. It's just the first few words of the parak. Okay, so this doesn't mean anything. It's just the way we codified it. They codified it. So, and it's the third chapter, the third parak in Yuma. Now, remember we said Yuma is the day. It's the day of Yom Kippur. So if you wanted to know any halachas of Yom Kippur, here's where you would find them. Now, I just picked this arbitrarily. I'll show you soon some great work that our Rebbe, my Rebbe, our Rebbe in our yeshiva in Dar Chinayim, see these are the bold are the words of the Mishnah, and Rebbe did some whispering here that I'm going to explain to you. It's in Hebrew, but he actually has another page where it's in English. So Rebbe did a fantastic job. Just prepare Rabbi Lowy. His name is Avram Chaim Lowy. He was a fourth grade Rebbe in our yeshiva years ago, and I used this Mishnah because I had great material for it. But be that as it may, here you get to see where the whispering is. Now, what we're going to learn, I'm actually going to learn just a few words with you. I'm going to translate them first, and you'll see why we desperately need a whisperer here. Now, I'm just translating the words now, okay? This Mem Saf Nun means Mishnah. Masnisin is the technical word, and this is Gemara. Now, you notice no punctuation here, right? So when the previous Gemara, what happens is the Gemara, we note a Mishnah, we translate it, we learn it, and then we have the Gemara goes through questions on the Mishnah, clarifying it, answering questions, and the like. So here are the words. We're reading just the words, and you'll see, of course, why you need someone to whisper. I'll be a whisperer today, together with Art Scroll and Rabbi Lowy. But here are the words. Pashat, he removed. Yarad, he went down. Yerida, Yored means to go down. I'm trying to find words. Taval is tevila, like going to a mikveh. So he, this is him. Pashat, he took off. Yarad, he went down. Taval, he taveled. He taveled in a mikveh. He dunked himself in a mikveh. Allah, he got up. Okay, that's a word you could see, like aliyah. People make aliyah to Israel, or someone gets an aliyah in shul. That means they were called upon, they were raised up, so to speak. So Allah, he rose. Vinistapek, he dried himself. Heviu lo, they brought to him. Big, they beged his clothing. Zahav, we may recognize as gold. Vilavash, he dressed himself. Vikidash, and he made holy. Yadav, yad is a hand. Regel is a foot. That's it. That's all we're learning today. Okay? Now, obviously, another reason I picked this is because it so illustrates the amount of information you need. And once you know it, that's it. You're done. You'll see that once I give you the background information now, everything fits into place and you're off to the races. But it's not knowing this background information. In other words, worded differently, when the people were discussing Gemara among themselves, they took it as an automatic that people knew this information. Similarly to me going in and listening to trying to get a recipe and not knowing any of those advanced words that people are using, okay? So caramelize the onions, well, whatever. Okay, so I don't know what that means. You better sit next to me and tell me what that means. Okay, so let's go. Pashat, he took off. Yarad, he went down. I'm going over the words again. V'taval, and he immersed himself. Allah, he got up. Nistapik, he dried himself. Hevioloi, they brought for him big of the gold clothing. The lavash, he got dressed. The kiddush, and he made holy. Yad of his hands, v'ragel of his feet. Okay, here's the information. It's not that complicated. You just have to know it. And the great news is that in Art Scroll or the other English translation Gemaras, if you go to the beginning, you'll find all this information that I'm telling you. They'll tell you in advance. Sometimes they'll tell you during the mission while they're translating it. I'll show you why, the reason I call it a whispering. Or sometimes they'll tell it to you, they'll tell you at the beginning or during. So here's the background information, okay? Throughout the year, Kohanim were descendants of Aharon. Aharon was a priest. What in English they call a priest. They served. They did the avodah, the service in the Beis Hamikdash, and in the desert before the Beis Hamikdash was built. It was called a Mishkan. It was like a temporary Beis Hamikdash, a place where God's presence is, where the Shekhinah was, and that's where Karbanos, the sacrifices, were brought. So the Aharon was the first Kohen, and after him, only his children were able to be Kohanim and do the service the avodah, the service, bringing sacrifices and doing all sorts of other things in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, which was in the Midbar, in the desert, before they got settled in Eretz Yisrael in Israel. And then they went to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, and they built the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, where around the other side of the Kosel Maravi and the Kotel, that's where the Beis HaMikdash was. Okay, now, so only the children of Aharon were able to be Kohanim. One person at each time was called the Kohen Gadol, the main Kohen. Aaron was the first Kohen Gadol, the great Kohen. Gadol means great. And during the year, all the Kohanim took turns. They had details are not important. They had a rotation system where every family got a turn, so to speak, a few times a year. On Yom Kippur, the only one who was allowed to do any part of the avodah was only the Kohen Gadol. So during the year, everybody brought karbanos. Everybody was doing different things, but on Yom Kippur, it was only the Kohen Gadol. Now, just again, small pieces of information, but it's woven together, and then all of this, you'll see how I'll show you how the English translations will help you get through this. So again, the background information you need to know so far is that all the service, all the avodah that was done in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim was done by Kohanim, plural. Kohanim is plural of Kohen. There was a Kohen Gadol that had certain responsibilities, but on the day of Yom Kippur, because it's the holiest day of the year, he was the only one who did everything. Now, a regular Kohen had 4 garments, okay? Had 4 garments, and they were all plain with no gold, with no metal on. You know, it was just, there was like a shirt that went like down to the knees. He wore a hat. He wore like undergarments, like a long, I guess, shorts to the knee. And he wore out like a gartel, a belt. Those were the 4 things that every Kohen wore. That was called a Kohen Hedyet, a regular Kohen. The Kohen Gadol had 8 garments, those 4, and then he had golden garments. They had 4 items of clothing that he wore that had gold on it. One last thing, well, not really, a few more things. Every time the Kohen Gadol, when he did the type of service, the type of avodah that was done every day, like there was a regular carbon that was brought in the morning, there was a carbon that was brought in the evening. During his day, when he did the same things that were done every day, he wore all of his garments. But when he did special Yom Kippur things, he took off his gold garments. Why? Because the gold was the first sin, the main avera, the first avera that the Jewish people did was the egel of the golden calf. And it's like a sore subject. You don't want to bring up, you have someone you love and you're in a relationship and, a sibling, a spouse, a parent, a child. There are certain subjects that are like the third rail. You don't want to bring them up because it evokes bad memories. So the gold would evoke memories of what the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, did in the desert, in the Midbar. With the gold they had, they made an egel hazav, a golden calf, and started serving it. So that was a big deal. So when the Kohen Gadol, even though he's a Kohen Gadol and he normally wears 8 articles of clothing, he would switch to only 4 that did not have gold when he did the service of Yom Kippur. We're almost there. Every time he changed his clothing, he went to the mikveh, washed his hands when he came out. Done. You're ready to go. Now let's go to the Mishnah. So again, this is all the whispering that's done. But once you got it, you got it. Okay, so let's go to the Mishnah now. Pashat, he took off his clothing. This is you know what? Let me go to Rabbi Lowy's great job here. Okay, Pashat, he took off Big Dechol, his weekday clothing, Atzmai, his own clothing. Okay, so he took off his weekday clothing. Okay, and Yarad Vitaval, he went he went down to the mikveh. The mikveh had steps. The taval, he toivel, he immersed himself. Allah, he got up, and and he dried himself. Hey, viulai, they brought to him, big day zahav, his other kaihanim, brought to him his gold clothing. And because he was the first thing every morning, there was a carbon that was brought every single day. So for that, he would wear his gold clothing. The lavash, he dressed himself. And like I told you earlier, every time he came out of the mikveh, he would wash his hands and feet. The kiddush, and he made holy yadav v'raglav, his hands and his feet. Similar to the fact that we wash our hands, before, when we eat or when we go into shul to daven, we may have, touched parts of our body. We should make a bracha for afterwards. So, but that's it. Okay, here you go. Now again, this thing that's, absolutely impossible to understand without the whispering, now really becomes quite clear. I hope you'll tell me now. We'll open up for Q&A. So in a moment. So here is the Rabbi Lowy's text. I'll show you how Art Scroll does it. Again, Pashat, he took off big day chayil, his weekday clothing. Yarad v'tavel, he went down and toveled. Shar Hamayim, that was the place he toveled in, and it was tefillah number 1. He immersed himself 5 times throughout the day. Olav and Estapeg, he took his big day zahav, and he washed his hands from the golden urn that they had. And here, Rabbi Lowy goes through exact details, similar to the way Art Scroll, which I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so in here it says Pashat, he took off. Okay, he undressed the big dechal, Yarad v'tovel. Sorry, it's not that clear. He went to the mikveh, and this is tefillah number 1. He got up and dried himself. It was necessary to dry himself. And so that's basically it. Now, Art Scroll has a very, with permission, I took, with permission, I made a copy of the Art Scroll page on this. And if you look here, sorry about that marking. If you look at, let me read you the Mishnah here, and hear the brilliance of the way, one of the brilliant things that Art Scroll did when they did their Pirush, this translation. What they did was, whatever was literal, not a whisper, that was exact translation, they had in bold, like a bold font, and the whispering is not in bold. Okay, so you see here, let's analyze, let's do this one a little carefully, those first couple of words. Okay, so Pashat, he undressed himself, right? So this undressed is a literal translation. Okay, Pashat, you see, so therefore it's in bold. Okay, Pashat, he undressed, just a moment. Excuse me. Okay, Yarad, he descended. Okay, this is also a literal translation. So Pashat, he undressed. And now this is a whisper. Since it's talking about the person, by the way, it's in bold, but it really is a form of whispering. It tells you who it is, so that they actually leave in bold. So Pashat, he undressed. Yarad, he went down. Now here you get a whisper, right, into the mikveh. So that's a way that they let you know, like, what's really going on here. So he went into the mikveh. The taval descended into the mikveh. Immersed. Here you go. Immersed. I'm sorry. Okay. So see, just a moment. So here, the taval is the third word that's listed here. The taval, and this is he immersed himself. Okay, so this is a literal translation, and what it tells you is he descended into the mikveh. Olav and Estapik, he ascended again. Allah, he got up. You see, he ascended, and Estapik, and he dried himself. Hey, v'ila big day zahav, they brought him his gold garments, all 8. Okay, here's some more whispering here, right? All 8, the ones that had the gold, and he put them on, and the kiddush yadav v'raglav, and then. Right, then as a whisper here, he sanctified, there's no word here that means then, he sanctified his hands and his feet, and a Talmud offering, and here the notes, they have notes on bottom with some of the details, the way Rabbi Lowy did it. So this the concept of the whispering here, again, that whispering is my word, is just a way to describe the way you would find this written in a Mishnah or Gemara, where there is, again, remember we said that some of the challenges we had, there are nakudos here. There are, you see this, look here, you see there's full punctuation here. There's a start and a stop. They do have, the periods and the commas to help you understand the flow of the Gemara. And what they do is, when necessary, sometimes in the notes, like it goes more into detail. Sometimes it'll go more into detail about what's going on here. But even in the translation, Pashat Yarad V'Tavel, he got undressed. He went down and he toveled, so it tells you that it's in the mikveh. He dried it, somebody brought him. This is why, because, and so again, my point is, if you are able to get a hold of a translation like this, and you read at the beginning of the parak, at the beginning of the chapter, or the beginning of the Masechta, you read some of that background information, you will have, between the notes and the translation, honestly, for virtually, certainly for a Mishnah, but for lots of Gemara, you will have all the tools you need to be able to follow. And whatever you don't know, you can look up, or today you can even, you can Google it. But I'm going to stop now and take some questions. Now, what we're going to do in subsequent shiurim, in subsequent lessons in this series, what we're going to do is, I'm going to actually start with a real piece of Gemara, and we're going to road test the skills that we have. But again, very quickly to review, we have the Torah Shabiksav, the written Torah. We had the oral Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu by Hashem, that was transmitted through the generations. Eventually, fearing that they'd be forgotten, they were written down. And then this body of knowledge first became the Mishnah. So Mishnah was, as you see, this is just a halacha, this is just facts. And later on, we're going to get into all sorts of questions and discussions in the Gemara itself. And I'm going to actually do that with you painlessly, I hope, over the next few evenings that we're together. Show you how it works, how the Gemara works, and you'll see, I hope, that it's really, once you understand how it works, and you understand this whispering thing, I think that might be, the more difficult. These are other logical thread we have actually in the book. We have great tools for relevance, auditory learning. This is the big deal. This whispering thing is the big deal, where people tend to get intimidated because it just seems to be a little bit overwhelming. It doesn't need to be. I'm going to I have a few more things that I'd like to do, but it's really not important. I'd like to take your questions. If anybody wants to chat, or if you'd like to, let me see if I can actually unmute. Maybe I'll take some questions. Okay, thank you very much. Great. Okay, anybody have any questions that you'd like to put in the chat? If not, I'll just finish with 5 minutes on something else. I believe you can wave. I'll see if I can get your streaming in. I was really concerned about getting hacked. I got hacked on a lesson previously when I did a share before, so that's why I took the video off. If everyone is the same group next time I have your names, I'll probably just leave it open. Anybody have any questions? Extremely clear and informative. Thank you very much.